Hey there everybody, and welcome back to more Silent Hill 2. I'm still Niggeroth, and it appears that we found some of the remains of Eddie's rampage. As to whom Eddie might have actually found down here and possibly shot or not shot, I'm not really sure. They don't really go into that. Or if, any of this even really exists. I mean, why would Toluca Lake Prison still exist with a mirrored painting? But we get our first quest item of the area. It's the Tablet of the Gluttonous Pig. Now, as we look at this, we'll notice that it has a very unique look to it, and that's because it's actually from an Aztec god. I will not horribly mispronounce the name of the god. Needless to say, it is a god in the Aztec realm that is known for wanton destruction and the use of a blow dart gun. But it's also known for being rather gluttonous, and it's supposed to symbolize Eddie. Eddie being a rather rotund gentleman, even though it's mostly due to, I guess, the assumed belittlement or actual belittlement of other people around him. But the blow dart gun we can only assume to be a direct analogy to the actual gun that Eddie carries around. But we did just pick up the map of the prison itself. It's not too large, I would say. It's pretty easy to get around. It may be a bit confusing, though, as to what you actually need to do here within this prison of one's own making. But first thing we notice in this general area, outside of the lying figures caged up, is that most of these prison cells are actually locked, but there are a couple we do have to make sure and get into. Also, James will be noticing something in just a second as we make our way down through the cells themselves. But yeah, not too much in this particular cell, just some handgun bullets. I decided since I have like 400 handgun bullets, I should probably use the handgun just a little bit. Yeah, as you can kind of hear, and as you can tell from James's view, he seems to notice something in the upper areas, but we'll get more into that later. This particular cell has a very odd little wax doll and a bunch of occult books. Try to look up some information on some of these, but obviously most of them are just purely fictional titles or just very direct references to things we should understand. And these marks on the wall don't seem to be the Metatron mark or seal of Metatron. I'm sure somebody will correct me on that. I also tried to look up Agrippa. Apparently it was a Roman general, but not too much occult knowledge was centered around that particular gentleman. But all we really needed in this hallway was that wax doll. Still, though, we need to find a few more tablets and a few more items to go along with that particular wax doll. I will say, though, that this clearly wasn't the most positive prison in the world. It's very ramshackle, bare. Even though it's kind of hard to assume whether or not this is the nightmare version of it or just what it actually looked like in the first place. But outside of the rifle shells, there's not too much in this room either. I was noticing, though, as we go through these hallways that there's some grating along the top, and maybe that was used for guard patrol. I'm not really sure. Could just be general, creepy aesthetic with the rust and all that jazz. Yeah, there's some nice little interesting flavor background stuff in this particular cell here. None of this is really plot necessary, or you never actually need to go in here, but still interesting. I mean, woman in flight. Not sure what this is supposed to mean. It could symbolize a witch. It could symbolize Superman. I don't know. No one seems to know, really. This one, though, we'll understand later on in the game as actually something very, very obvious. But we'll get to it whenever we get there later on. And this last one seemed to be quite up to speculation, since it's a very specific number and a very large amount of people. Some people have been wanting to assume that it might be in reference to a blood ritual that went on here to summon up an evil blood god, whose name I won't pronounce because it's unfuckably believably long. But yeah, it apparently needed like 400 plus people to be sacrificed for the blood, and oh yeah, there's also another one of those invisible guys over here chanting something about a ritual. But it looks like there's another tablet in this cell, so go ahead and pick that up. Also notice some religious, like Christian icons on the wall there, such as the bearing of the cross. Kind of goes along vaguely with the idea of the oppressor, who we also see is another Aztec god. This one apparently is supposed to be the woman who is the goddess of filth. Ah, the door's locked. Yet again, very strong and obvious metaphor, I suppose, to being oppressed and, you know, stuck into a place that you don't want to be. But yeah, the goddess of filth is, in that particular image, being oppressed by an unknown male who seems to be reaching for her rather suggestively, and it's supposed to, the oppressor is actually supposed to be James, if you can believe it. It's supposed to reference his sexual attraction to his wife while still having to be kept at bay by her own filth or the disease that she was suffering from. As to how much you want to actually read into that, it's really up to you, but a lot of this has been gone on record by Konami as saying, yes, this is clearly what this is, and this is what this is. Then there are specifically 3 tablets for, you know, the 3 main people that we have run into. And this last one is, I think it's pronounced like Mayhew. It's supposed to be representative of Angela, you know, because she is very seducing. She's very seducing. I'm very good at words. No, she's very... Well, the actual god herself was supposed to be representative of a tree. And I guess her and Quetzalcoatl were trying to run away from some people, and they decided to disguise themselves as a tree, but Mayhew got found out by these star demons, and she was ripped apart, and the branches were picked up by Quetzalcoatl, and then buried, and then somehow sprang root to these plentiful thorny trees in the Aztec culture that were also used for an alcoholic beverage. A lot of that is very connected to Angela overall, such as, you know, the knife she had was supposed to be representative of the thorn, and we'll find out later about the whole alcohol angle. But anyway, now that we do have all 3 of our pieces of penance, I suppose, it's now time to head to the place where we're actually supposed to use them. I do want this overall to be a representation of why I choose not to use the pistol. It's good at, obviously, at long range, but the problem is its stopping power. It's just, it's not that great. A lot of these things should be dead, but what I've been noticing is that you can, I don't know if you knock them unconscious or what, but sometimes you'll enter back into an area and they'll just be right back up and you'll have to kind of kill them again. But this very large room that we decided to ignore earlier on is rather ominous looking for one thing. But it actually has a very special purpose in the prison, and that was because it was used for one of the forms of execution. Or actually, that it might have been used for both forms of execution. Let's just take a look at this plaque here, with some very familiar icons on it. Now, we've already gotten the 3 plaques for each one of the sins, and I guess James is going to be atoning for all of them, which is, it's a mighty heavy burden for him to pay, but, you know, he's a good guy, relatively. So we'll just go ahead and combine all these down, and go ahead and use them. Yeah, the first time I heard that scream, it actually scared the shit out of me. I wasn't really expecting it at all, but nothing too obvious actually happened there, so I'm not really sure. Oh, something's on the door. And it is a horseshoe. We'll find out in a little bit. There's no direct metaphor for the horseshoe. It's just a horseshoe, and there's no real metaphor for the wax doll. It's just, they're just part of a future goofy adventure game little puzzle. But for the most part, we're actually almost done entirely with the prison. The prison itself is not that long, which I suppose is kind of a mixed bag. I do enjoy the general aesthetic to it. It has a lot of little pieces of backstory and interesting imagery in it, but it's also mostly just corridors, which isn't that interesting. It does